Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 5th of September 2024. An awful lot to go through today in this video, as there has been in every single video today. It's been a jam-packed day, my goodness. Okay, so we're going to start with France and the ex-European Commissioner, former French Foreign Minister Michel Barnier. People involved in the Brexit debates and vote in UK in 2016 will know Michel Barnier. He was very prominent during those times as an advocate for the EU. He was the European Commissioner at the time. Anyway, he's been appointed as the new French Prime Minister, so he sits sort of centre-right, I think. Although people in the UK probably wouldn't see him in that way because people saw him as representing the EU and they think therefore that he's some kind of lefty liberal regulator. Actually, not at all. Like a lot of the prominent leaders in the EU are centre-right. Ursula von der Leyen is a great example of that. Anyway, Michel Barnier is now French Prime Minister. Served as foreign minister from 2004 to 5, also headed EU negotiating group on Brexit, and that's how we would know him in the UK. So this is an interesting appointment and is probably quite sensible in terms of where he sits politically. Be interesting to see what his position is on Ukraine and whether France can come back to the fore in terms of supporting Ukraine, because that's since the Olympics came along and then when obviously France were going to be rather distracted by the Olympics in Paris, Ukraine has taken a back seat and we haven't really seen France be strong on it since the rise of Rassemblement National. Anyway, Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner has met Andriy Yermak. So Andriy Yermak is in the presidential team in Ukraine. He's the person that most Ukrainians who are critical of their own government are critical of. A lot of people would like to see Andriy Yermak go. He's supposedly the one with the most power in Ukraine without being the person in elected power. Anyway, Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner met with him and others to hear a military update the situation on the ground, discuss increasing sanctions against Russia, and join a peace formula on food security to underscore the importance of Black Sea security to the world. Now, there's still been no change on US restrictions for the Ukrainian usage of Western weapons into Russia, deep into Russia. Unfortunately, John Kirby's come out again today since I did my previous update and reiterated that position. So that's a real frustration, but he is saying that they are talking about it, or they are in close contact with the Ukrainians at all times. All right, Ivana Stradner, the Balkans expert, says today Putin met with the Serbian government, which said that Serbia will never become a NATO member under Vučić. Serbia, as Russia's strategic partner, is Russia's strategic partner and will never impose sanctions on Russia. So, yeah, if you're wondering where Serbia sit, that's where they sit. I've just read the full speech. She says two interesting things. Vucic's balancing strategy doesn't bode well for Moscow, though. So an interesting, more nuanced position. He has often been someone who promises much to the EU and to the West to keep them on side whilst also doing a lot for Russia. He's a typical talk out both sides of your mouth kind of guy in order to get inward investment from the West, but actually still remain politically under the influence of the East. But he has mentioned that Serbia-Russia gas contract will expire in March 2025, so he'll use more leverage in negotiations in the coming months. Also, Vučić a few days ago told Western leaders that he has no contact with Putin. Of course, Putin, with his KGB manipulative tactics, put him on the defensive and immediately invited him to Kazan for BRICS meeting to test his loyalty and show that the West has no control over Belgrade. Quite interesting times are on the horizon for Serbia and the Balkans more widely. Now, BRICS is a very important topic at the moment because there are increasing numbers of countries that are seeking to join BRICS. We'll come to that in a little while. So Russia is producing microchips under older machines from the Dutch company ASML. Russian companies are acquiring spare parts primarily through intermediaries in China to keep these machines operational. Microchips are crucial for Russia's war industry. So they are getting microchips from a whole host of places. And it is frustrating because it is allowing them to keep on manufacturing certain weapons and equipment. Now, sort of on this topic, Italy has exports to Kyrgyzstan that are at record levels. New all-time highs for Italy's exports to Kyrgyzstan in May 2024. This puts Italy's imports 2,200% over where they were before Russia invaded Ukraine. You don't have to be a genius to know this stuff is going to Russia. 2 years of this nonsense and the EU just looks away, says Robin Brooks, who is consistently keeping tabs on what the exports are from different nations to places like Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, etc., etc. Okay, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim reconfirmed that Malaysia wants to join BRICS, so added to all these other nations that are interested. Turkey, as we are now hearing about, wanting to join. Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, and other nations from all different corners of the globe. An intergovernmental organisation that is BRICS, which comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but also Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE appear to be aligned to BRICS, somewhat part of it as well. Quote, as Malaysia continues to expand its geo-economic space and diversify its strategic relationships, Russia will be a key partner that shares our vision for growth, prosperity, and development, he said. Screw you, mate. Absolutely screw you. If you want to see Russia as a key partner, you're an absolute knob. Anyway, sorry, that's an official geopolitical term. Erdogan will attend the BRICS summit in Kazan, according to Turkish TV channel Haberturk. He again is looking to take Turkey in that direction. Very problematic since they are a member of NATO and are buying NATO equipment. The process of Georgia's accession to the European Union has been almost completely suspended, according to the EU delegation. So it's no surprise then that not only are they putting into place the foreign agents law from Russia, imported from Russia, but also they are starting to put restrictive laws concerning LGBTQ plus rights, which is drawing EU condemnation. The law bans transgender transition, same-sex adoptions, drawing parallels to Russia's restrictive legislation. So they're going down that route. It is, like I've said for some time, we're in this almost simplistic time where nations are choosing sides. You've got one side or the other. And it appears that a number of nations are edging towards, unfortunately, the BRICS part of side of the equation. Now, we have Russian disinformation operation has manipulated German, French, Italian and UK politicians, business people, journalists and other influencers to sow division, discredit America and undermine support for Ukraine. Germany was seen as an easy target. So Politico has got this big article on this. The FBI obtained documents revealing Russia's extensive disinformation campaign aimed at winning over European hearts and minds, which entails manipulating UK, Italian, French, German officials and influencers and journalists. So exactly what we are seeing with regard to the US at the moment. And I did that breaking news analysis today. Well, Russia conducts a large-scale psychological warfare in Europe, according to this FBI dossier. So let's read through the Euromaidan press piece here. It's not overly long. So documents obtained by the FBI reveal that Russia is conducting psychological warfare in Europe with the goal of being to sow division, discredit the US and undermine support for Ukraine, according to a host of Russian documents, memos and minutes from Russian psychological warfare meetings. The indictments shed light on a far-reaching Russian disinformation campaign aimed not only at the United States but also several European countries. It shows how Russia actively aims to destabilize Western democracies to further its own national or geopolitical interests, with the ultimate goal of sowing discord, discrediting the US and undermining support for Ukraine. As reported by Politico, so that's from Politico, that excerpt, the Russian operation to win over Europeans' hearts and minds entails manipulating those nations, politicians, business people, journalists and other influencers. The US government on the 4th of July indicted 2 Russian citizens and seized more than 30 internet domains related to a campaign to influence the elections in the US, but the trove of information filed in court by the FBI also revealed that Russia is conducting psychological warfare in Europe as well. The documents were obtained by the FBI and filed on a court affidavit as part of the indictments made yesterday. So the 277-page dossier describes how Russia is planning to target Europeans. One memo from Russia's social design agency described the plan to target people via real posts and comments on social media to to circumvent social media companies' bot filters. And welcome to my threads on YouTube. Welcome to the many bots that have been crawling around, just disseminating their vile contagion over the boards this morning, after I did that piece on Russian disinformation and how it's affecting the US elections and the indictments. They are everywhere. They're on every one of my videos. I have shadow banned a whole number of just overt, and some of my mods have overt Russian disinformation trolls, but more will come, no doubt. So yeah, welcome guys, you horrible people. The Social Design Agency acts under the orders of the Russian President Putin's Deputy Chief of Staff, Kiriyenko, according to the FBI court affidavit. Quote, the Russian document says the goal of the campaign is to evoke in the audience rationals such as, really, why do we need to help Ukraine? And emotional such as, Americans are such scumbags, reactions. And we are seeing that. I can point out, let's go and find one from this morning, shall we? So, goodness me, right, this is my video from today. This is hilarious. Next, we're going to hear that Ukraine is not losing. It was all disinformation. GTFO, the Donbass collapse is real. Same person, because I'm sure pro-Ukrainian channels aren't being manipulated by the Ukrainian government. These people are having a mental breakdown because they know it's the end of Ukraine. Congrats, you played yourself. This is pure gaslighting by the Democrats, neoconservatives and mainstream media. Russian troll there trying to stir the pot. I'm sure, yeah, here's one. Mr. Pierce, may I ask you a question? You and your dear collective Westernist friends, blah, 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 have you ever bothered to criticise the US for, and then it's just a massive thing of whataboutism about Afghanistan and Iraq and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, we're talking about a war that's going on now. You know, I will criticise that and have criticised that in the past, Guantanamo tortures. I've included stuff in my books about stuff like this, but this is a war that's going on right now. People are dying right now. And that's what I'm worried about. And the US are on the side of the Ukrainians, and they are the good guys here, and Russia are the bad guys. And if you want to do that whataboutism, well, it's not going to work with me. So, you know, today there are already trolls on my threads doing their thing. Okay, the psyops are also relied on, says Eurominded Press. They also relied on so-called doppelganger domains to spread fake articles and content made to look like they came from Western media outlets. The domains include fakes of Reuters, Der Spiegel, Bild, Le Monde, Le Parisien, Welt, FAZ, FAZ, Süddeutsche Zeitung, Delphi, and others, and were paid for with cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, according to the FBI affidavit. The Russian PSYOPs team identified Germany as a particularly vulnerable target for Russian influence. AFD, anyone? BSW, anyone? The far right and far left in there that have just gained a really massive win, I guess, in Eastern Germany, are, you know, showing that Germany really is ripe for Russian disinformation. Quote, the Germans are more dependent than the French, reads one of the Russian documents, presumably referring to Germany's economic dependence on Russian gas and exports. Quote, first and foremost, we need to discredit the USA, Great Britain and NATO, and secondly, convince Germans to oppose the inefficient politics of sanctions, the FBI quoted an internet Russian note as saying. Another social design agency document outlines an operation called International Conflict Incitement, specifically targeting France and Germany. Its objective, quote, to escalate internal tensions in order to promote the interests of the Russian Federation, as well as to influence real-life conflicts and artificially create conflict situations via fake articles, influences, as well as targeted posts and comments on social media. Now, for me, this should be the main news on every single channel, and they should be using these quotes from these documents and dossiers and from both the FBI and from the original source material to show to the general public out there that they might well be being manipulated by the Russians in the social media information spaces that they hang out in. Anyway, the Russian document added that the goal was to, quote, destabilize the societal situation in France and Germany by spreading additional false narratives, fake videos, documents and telephone conversation recordings, comments on social media, and fake and real quotes from influencers. This is happening, and it's so good that this is now going through the American legal system, judicial system. There are indictments to be had. There is action being taken on a much more explicit level. This is so important, not just for American democracy, not just for European democracy, for our global security. Absolutely vital. Right. and talking about what has happened in America with the indictments. Now, I did my whole video on that before. I don't want to particularly go over it again, but it is useful for those who haven't watched that. I'm going to go through the Pekka Kaluniemi Vatnik Soup thread on it that he wrote today. And I actually meant to do this in my previous video, but it already went on for an hour, didn't it? In today's Vatnik Soup, I'll discuss the Kremlin's funding of Tennessee-based media company Tenet Media. Tenet Media is best known for their promotion of Russian narratives and for strong support of Donald Trump in the upcoming 2024 election. So here we have media startup from Benny Johnson, Tim Pool and Dave Rubin was secret Russian influence campaign, indictment alleges. Okay, first, it's worth stating that the funding originated from Kremlin-controlled RT, Russia Today, and that the funding was masked through shell companies in countries like Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Mauritius, with the money being described as payments for electronics. The two individuals involved from RT, and by the way, when I'm speaking, if you're just listening, I am also putting up quotes from the affidavit and snippets and whatnot to support this, so you can pause the video and read them if you want. The two individuals involved from RT, identified as Konstantin Kalashnikov and Elena Afanasieva, have been charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. These two also instructed the content creators. Tenet was founded in 2022 by Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan, so Chen is super important, who is also the president of the company. Chen is a contributor to Charlie Kirk's non-profit Turning Point USA, and also has written opinion pieces for RT between 2021 and 2022. So one has to understand how integrated the American right-wing information ecosystem is with Russian propaganda media outlets. So when you have these people contributing to, say, Turning Point USA and contributing to The Blaze and also contributing to the Russia's RT directly, like paid up writers for Russian propaganda outlets, then you have to be thinking that if you are mixing in this ecosystem, you are also being poisoned by elements from this ecosystem. Super, super worrying. And, you know, I'm not trying to be some lefty liberal, like, remonstrating about the right wing. Like, this isn't an excuse for me to bash the right wing. This is partly why I am so dubious of right-wing media sources. Because they consistently peddle narratives like this. And, oh, lo and behold, they have writers for their sources, for their organizations who are writers for the Russian Kremlin. I have previously written about, says Kaluniemi, a shift in tactics of Russian information operations, suggesting that instead of using bot and troll accounts with limited following, they've started supporting social media super spreader accounts with huge reach. And this is really important. That's definitely what they are doing. And this is kind of what we're about here. Next, let's look at the people involved in Tenet Media. Tim Pool is one of them. Benny Johnson is another one. Dave Rubin and Lauren Southern are probably the biggest names in the bunch. And this group alone has a combined follower count on Twitter of around 7 million people. They also produce content on YouTube. One of the four, Tim Pool, was the one who went all in with his videos. In one of his videos, he claimed that Ukraine is the enemy of the country, that Ukraine triggered a conflict by blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, also suggesting that we should apologize to Russia. Now, I've shown this to you twice before. I did it this morning, did it in a previous video, but people were pointing out that what he does is read from a script here, and the idea is that that script has been developed for him by, say, Tenet Media or Russians or whatever, pro-Russian thinkers. Not necessarily. I mean, many people have scripted videos. You guys know for sure as hell I don't. I go off on one, digress, can't find words, say a lot, say a lot, and generally get stuck as my brain is trying to catch up with my mouth, which is reflecting my brain, and I get stuck in some kind of feedback loop. Anyway, he may well just script his shows. I don't know. I don't see him script it. I don't see him reading from the script often, though. I've not seen a huge amount of Tim Pool because I absolutely despise him. But here he is reading from the script, and it is insanely anti-Ukrainian.
They know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them.
So people claiming that he's looking at the script, but I personally think that this is just to him, actually.
What to do. Ukraine is now.
But then the idea is that this is where he goes back to the script.
Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
So my guess, actually, just looking at that again, so this is me now changing my mind, I think he's reading bullet points and going off. So I'm going to play this to you again. Each of those reads like a bullet points and is not in his language, and then he adds to them. So I think he's got a list of bullet points.
And they know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
Bullet point there.
They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong.
Bullet point, then, now don't get me wrong. They're expanding this war, and then now don't get me wrong, blah, blah, blah.
You've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Ukraine.
So then goes back to a bullet point.
Is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict.
Untrue.
Ukraine is the greatest.
So then each of the one of these starts with Ukraine.
Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support.
And he's clearly reading that.
And we should apologize to Russia.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. Apologise to Russia, my arse. Anyway, so he's one of these people who is part of that ecosystem. Tim's also been vocal over Ukraine on Twitter and especially on the US military aid to the country. So Will's on the screen at the moment, again, for those who are only listening, I am bringing up tweets from Tim Pool like this one. I now hate and despise Ukraine, he says. As in response to Chuck Schumer saying Ukraine is dangerously low on supplies. If America doesn't send aid to Ukraine with this national security bill, Putin is all too likely to succeed. That is what Tim Pool reacts to say, I now hate and despise Ukraine. Why would you hate and despise Ukraine? Because Chuck Schumer has said that Putin is likely to succeed if we don't help them. Why does that make you hate and despise Ukraine? Again, this is very obviously showing that Tim Pool is either grifting for Russia or is really far down that rabbit hole. There's another Tim Pool one here. It says, Trump got impeached for freezing military aid to Ukraine. Biden faces no consequences for freezing military aid to Israel. This proves that Ukrainians run the US. Now when someone asks, who is they, though, you respond, the Ukrainians. As if the Ukrainians are getting everything they want with 7 months of impasse and not being able to strike deep into Russia. But apparently still the Ukrainians are running the American government. Right, Tim Pool. Then he says the people screaming about Trump working for Russia are the same people demanding social media censor misinformation. Stop listening to these people. Whatever. And then here's a screenshot of all of his claims about civil war. And this is really important. So a number of people have pointed this out. This has done the socials, that he is one that is really big on division, sowing division. That's why he's big on these culture wars stuff, culture war nuggets that are really divisive, and shouting about how US is going to civil war, as if almost wanting it to, willing it towards civil war, because that's exactly what Russia would want. So anyway, as Pekka Kalianiemi says, Tim's also been vocal over Ukraine on Twitter and especially on the US military aid to the country. He's also suggested that Trump could potentially de-escalate the war quickly. Incidentally, these posts became much more common after Tenet got their funding from Russia. And then Johnson's main talk, this is on to Benny Johnson now. Johnson's main talking points have revolved around stopping the Ukraine aid and emphasizing the domestic problems in the US naturally caused by the evil Democrats. Apparently, he was paid $400,000 per month and also received a signing bonus of $100,000. wow. So quite incredible there. And of course, we understand that Tim Pool was getting $100,000 an episode for his podcast there. We got Benny Johnson here saying politicians are waving Ukraine flags in the halls of Congress and chanting Ukraine as they vote to send another $60 billion overseas. Insane. Typical sort of stuff we saw at the time from those people. And then we've got Benny Johnson, Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate's perfect take on Ukraine. Benny Johnson, then these are videos that he's done. Chip Roy's Savages, Democrats sending billions to Ukraine. Another video, Trump solves Ukraine war. We would have a deal made in 24 hours. And a final video here, Ukraine war, Trump's perfect answer. And then we have all of these videos here that Vivek Ramaswamy goes nuclear, instant regret. CNN has on-air panic attack as Vivek flips script on host. Trudeau's government's collapsing. Waltz is fan for Trump, blah blah blah. We've got typically all the kind of mixture of woke, anti-woke stuff and pro Trump, anti-Trudeau, anti-Democrats, anti-this and that, Epstein thrown in there, so on and so forth. Johnson's main talking points appear to be well documented there. Okay, in the case of Lauren Southern, the Russian connection is more evident. In 2018, she visited Moscow to meet with Alexander Dugin. Holy crap, I didn't know this. So Alexander Dugin is your philosopher, nationalist, extremist philosopher, ultra-nationalist philosopher who underwrites much of Putin's thinking, and visited by Lauren Southern there. She visited Moscow to meet Alexander Dugin, a political philosopher who's provided the blueprint for Russian imperialism in his 1997 book, Foundations of Geopolitics. So here we have a Casey Michel article, Why is a Pizzagate Truther meeting with a Russian neo-fascist? Far-right darlings Lauren Southern and Brittany Pettibone head to Russia to meet with Alexander Dugin. All of this right-wing ecosystem in the US is so closely aligned and meshed with the Russian political landscape. It's really, really worrying. Okay, and then Pekka carries on. Apparently, the Russian operatives could influence the content posted by Tenet Media. Afanasieva had requested the media company post Tucker Carlson's visit to Russian French grocery store, even though one of the producers felt like it was overt shilling. And I talked about this earlier. So it looks like the Russians were saying to Tenet, you need to get this stuff out. And one example was, we want you to share this Tucker Carlson interview, or it was a grocery store bit where he goes around a Russian supermarket, but actually one of the producers says, this looks too obvious. He said, they want me to post this, referencing the video from Afanasieva that they posted, but, quote, it just feels like overt shilling. And absolutely right. I mean, it would have been, but, that's what they do otherwise. Thinks we should have put it out there. Producer one acquiesced, responding, all right, I'll put it out tomorrow. So, yeah, there you go. They did put it out. Tenet Media there. And here we go. Tucker Carlson, blah, blah, blah. So, yes, there you go. Pekka continues. In another example, Afanasieva told the company they should blame Ukraine for the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack, even though ISIS had previously claimed responsibility for the massacre. And of course, this is what the Russian administration did, is what the Kremlin did. Lauren Chen, replied that one of the influencers was happy to cover it. Well, that's good, Lauren Chen. Okay, and that's detailed there. Okay, next, according to the indictment, Tenet Media founders knew that both Kalashnikov and Afanasieva were Russian, yet chose to work with them anyway. Tenet Media's creators have a huge online reach. Their 2,000 YouTube videos have amassed over 16 million views. And again, I'm sharing lots of the supporting evidence here. Dave Rubin has already claimed that him and the other commentators were, quote, victims of the scheme, but apparently they had no trouble in receiving money from the fake persona called Edouard Grigorian without doing background checks or performing their due diligence. Yet again, if I was receiving $100,000 an episode for one of my videos, I would be wondering where the hell that money was coming from and why I was being given it. But there you go. So Dave Rubin denying it all and blaming, claiming he's the victim in this. Statement of the DOJ indictment, says Dave Rubin. These allegations clearly show that I and other commentators were the victims of the scheme. I knew absolutely nothing about the fraudulent activity, period. People of the internet was a silly show covering viral videos which ended 4 months ago. The DOJ has never contacted me regarding this matter, and I have no intention to comment further. The screenshot directly from the indictment speaks for itself. And of course, they might not have contacted him, because then that alerts everyone else. What you do is you do all your research, do your indictment, and then you talk to them under rather different circumstances. So here we go, some more supporting evidence up there. Edward Gregorian, yeah, that's there. Okay. To continue, Benny Johnson also referred to himself and the other influencers as victims and as strong advocates for freedom of speech, threatened to sue anyone who claims otherwise. I'm an advocate for freedom of speech. If you say that, I'm going to sue you. But I am an advocate for freedom. Don't say that. I will sue you. But yeah, you can say what you like. I'm a freedom of speech. I will sue you. I will sue you. Don't say it. Yeah, you can say it. You can say it. Don't say it. So I'm not going to call him a Russian agent, but I really do think he is both greedy and naive, says Pekka Kalioniemi. And the whole issue is, or part of the issue is how much were these people witting or unwitting. On the other hand, this shows how easily these online political commentators can be bought to share specific political narratives, even when they're formulated by the spin doctors of a foreign state. I guess anything goes when you're paid $400,000 a month. In reality, the Russian intelligence services prefer if you don't know you're working for them. And this is absolutely true. It's more deniability, isn't it? A foreign agent can be witting, knowingly working for a foreign government, or unwitting, unknowingly working for a foreign government. The latter often referred to as useful idiots. So this is David Korn saying, looks like Tucker Carlson was a Russian useful idiot, and Tenet Media, a right-wing US media company allegedly financed by Russia, helped a Moscow propagandist effort to exploit Carlson. And I think what you have here is a large degree of exploitation of useful idiots. Don't deny that at all. Fortunately, it seems that the US officials have become more efficient in detecting foreign influencing in the US elections. In 2016 and 2020, they fumbled badly, but this time they were able to report a massive funding scheme before the elections actually took place. Of course, the usual suspects have already started deflecting on the subject. For example, David Sachs has shifted the topic to paid Ukrainian influencers. So he's one of the tech bros like Elon Musk. David Sachs has written, when do we get to see who's on Ukraine's payroll? I bet there are some much bigger names than podcasters. Of course, yeah, I'm one of them, mate. Yeah, I'm massively on the Ukrainian payroll. Yeah, of course I am. I'm all doing this because Ukraine are paying me gazillions. But no, you shut up, David Sachs. Of course not. And there is an awful lot of deflection. It's really interesting. If you see, I've seen a couple of videos today of Fox News and how they've responded to this, and they have absolutely not reported this properly, and they think this is part of a Democrat, typical Democratic behaviour like you've seen previously, etc., etc. So unfortunately, Fox News are not letting their audience know about the scope of the issues here. But yeah. Anyway, to continue about David Sachs, completely oblivious to the fact that some people might actually defend a sovereign nation completely free of charge. There you go. To conclude, Russia has shifted its online influencing strategy, and in addition to using vast bot and troll networks, they now provide monetary support for social media super spreader accounts via shell companies, and think this is just the tip of the iceberg, he says. So again, reference to the NBC article I read from this morning, Russian money was funneled to right-wing orators through a pro-Trump media outlet, according to prosecutors. That's not orators, creators. Now, here's an interesting bunch of screen grabs of Elon Musk replies and amplifications and reposts of Benny Johnson, Tim Cast, etc., etc. It's like Tim Pool. Elon Musk has then become part of this amplification process. And as someone here says, Joshua Reed Eagle says, I think I'm starting to understand why Tim Pool is so obsessed with civil war. And the idea is that peddling the idea that the US is going to civil war just adds to that sense of chaos and division. Now, talking about Lauren Southern, looks like every second Tenet pundit was also peddling Viktor Orban's propaganda or even visited Hungary. Besides getting secret payments from Russia, it seems like they've received speaking fees for talking at MCC Budapest, which is Matthias Corvinus Collegium, Hungary's largest interdisciplinary educational institution. I'm assuming that's a right-wing institution. And the Danube Institute, which certainly is. So the Danube Institute is a really problematic think tank that funds basically through Russia into, you could argue Russian money comes into Hungary, but certainly Hungarian money, propaganda, literally from the propaganda budget, goes to the Bethany Foundation and the Danube Institute. And those two organizations unfortunately, they fund the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation has written Project 2025 for Donald Trump's administration. And Tucker Carlson's father sits on the board for a lobbying company who lobbies on behalf of the Viktor Orban, so lobbies for Viktor Orban. And Tucker Carlson has taken he's taken himself many times he's interviewed Viktor Orban. You've had the CPAC Conservative Conference in Budapest, is it twice? The connections to Viktor Orban's Hungary and Russia and Heritage Foundation are huge. There are just so many problems with regard to that whole ecosystem, and its deep connections to Hungary, to dictators, to Orban, and of course to Russia and Putin. And Lawrence Southern here, speaking for the Danube Institute in Hungary, is no surprise certainly not to me. Right, now we are hearing that supposedly new reports indicate Republicans are panicking following reports of their largest media supporters being paid by the Russian government. Now, that could be, this is from Kamala's win, so this is a Kamala Harris kind of pro-Harris handle, but there might well be panic in the corridors of the GOP at the moment. How do they deal with this? Fox News is working on their behalf to try and minimize it by saying this is all part of a Democratic, so the indictment is just a Democratic ruse to associate the Republicans with kind of ne'er-do-wells and whatever. What an interesting reaction is looking to what Elon Musk has done. So today he's so far posted 82 times to try and cover up the truth of the MAGA influencers being exposed for being Russian sellouts. It didn't work, says this source, but Elon Musk has gone mental, and he's going really hard on pro-Trump stuff and saying how terrible everything to do with the Democrats and Harris campaign and everything is. He's gone totally overboard today, and there is no coincidence, that it is that he's done that. This is a definite reaction to that news coming out, because he's part of that ecosystem. When you look at all of these, again, screen grabs of how deeply ensconced Elon Musk is with these people in that landscape, then you can understand why he's reacted like that. And indeed, as mentioned earlier, David Sachs too, crisis management, hurry up now, this is not a drill, says Ilya Ponomarenko too. David Sachs saying, as I said earlier, when do we get to see who's on Ukraine's payroll? I bet there are some bigger names than podcasters. Now, Jay in Kyiv says, before Tim Pool started taking $400,000 a month of Russian money to produce Kremlin disinformation, he visited Kyiv during the Maidan protests, praising Ukraine's pro-democracy choice and the protests as democracy happening. So, the question is, why does someone do a 180 shift? And the same can be said about Elon Musk. Elon Musk was pro-Ukrainian at the beginning of the war. Then I think pressure was put on him from Russia and China, as it was very clear, it's clear to me that he needs money and support from Russia and China, and he needs natural resources from Russia and China. So I think that explains why he shifted, and it is a case of following the money. Why did Tim Pool go from supporting Ukraine and actually filming from the Maidan protests in 2014 to now being Ukraine is the enemy, is evil? Follow the money. Oh, he's getting £400,000 a month in Russian money. I wonder why he's saying that. Yeah, of course. That's why he's saying that. Now, malcontent news here saying Scott Ritter, the famous Scott Ritter, married to a Georgian but being very pro-Russian, and he's someone who is absolutely in that whole ecosystem. He suddenly cares about US sanctions and ended his cooperation with Sputnik and RT. So we've had Scott Ritter, who's under investigation from Farah, has now himself been, let's do a bit of timeline on Scott Ritter. So June the 3rd, Scott Ritter claims his passport was confiscated while trying to board a flight that would ultimately take him to St. Petersburg, Russia for the Economic Forum, where Putin was. August the 6th, Ritter and US presidential candidate RFK Jr. posed for a picture together in a chance meeting. And that's a picture I showed you earlier where it's like JFK Jr., who's also pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian, it seems, is smiling and happy and doing a selfie with Scott Ritter. August the 7th, Ritter's home is raided by the FBI, who take boxes of evidence and electronic devices from his home. August the 16th, FBI raids the home of a former 2016 Trump advisor, Dmitry Simes. Simes hosted a Q&A with autocrat Putin in 2023 and is a regular contributor to RT. August the 25th, Telegram CEO and founder Pavel Durov is arrested in Paris. August the 25th, Russian propagandist Solovyev worries that Scott Ritter won't be able to emigrate to Russia due to proposed legislation changes. September the 4th, DOJ releases indictment on the founders of Tenet Media Group for election interference and Russian connections and a paid influence campaign involving 6 prominent social media figures with connections to RT and payment of $10 million US dollars. September the 4th as well, emergency weekend meeting call for Trump campaign surrogates ordered to lawyer up and not to talk to anyone in the media. Social media influencers connected to Tenet Media are in panic. And then September the 5th, so today, Scott Ritter ends his cooperation with Sputnik and RT due to, quote, sanctions. No shit, Sherlock. Unsurprising that's happened since you are massively under investigation and in a spot of bother. So what's interesting, so I've been wondering about this because I'm doing my US elections videos, and there's been these Polymarket ones I've been reporting on. Polymarket is a betting market as to who is more likely to win. Right, and Polymarket is the only betting market that suddenly started showing Trump winning. 42% to 47 is this one, and yet all the polls are generally trending towards Kamala Harris. They have kind of steadied a little bit recently, but generally the polls have been trending towards Kamala Harris. The betting market's been trending towards Kamala Harris. And then Polymarket has suddenly gone the other way. And I couldn't work out why this was. And then read this, and it all freaking makes sense. And I've also been wondering about Nate Silver. So Nate Silver, just to let you know, is a guy who started 538, the kind of polling aggregators and analysts. He's now no longer with 538. And I don't know the background of him not being with them anymore. And there's another guy running them. They're doing a bit of a better job by all accounts. He's just written a book. Nate Silver's doing the rounds on that. And he's always interesting to listen to, but he's saying a few odd things at the moment. And anyway, here, Jake and the Derg says, Polymarket is owned by Peter Thiel. I didn't know that. So Peter Thiel is one of the tech bros. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian. So Polymarket is owned by Peter Thiel, employs Nate Silver. I didn't know Polymarket employed Nate Silver, so that makes a little bit of sense of some of Nate Silver's declarations recently, who was telling everyone Trump is winning. Benny Johnson works for Tenet Media, a company funded by Russia Today, according to a DOJ indictment announced today. So Benny Johnson here is sharing a Polymarket claim that Trump's lead in the odds just hit 5%. So Trump's doing really well in the betting market for winning the election, which is against what all the other ones are showing. And then Benny Johnson is now spreading that and saying Kamala collapse is confirmed. So this idea that the Kamala Harris campaign is now collapsing. It's like, really? Okay, that's not what I'm seeing from all the other data, but it now makes a lot of sense. Join the dots. Goodness me. And Tim Miller here from the Bulwark says the people who convinced Senator Mike Lee. So Mike Lee is a senator who is spreading huge amounts and has been for a long time, huge amounts of pro-Russian disinformation and propaganda. So he started up this Twitter account called Based Mike Lee. And it's really annoying. Anyway, Tim Miller says, so basically Mike Lee said, 2 years ago today, these guys convinced me to start this account. It was 1 part experiment and 2 parts dare. It's been a fun ride and I'll be forever grateful for them for talking me into it. Thank you. Who's he thanking? Well, one of them is Benny Johnson, and a few others there. And Tim Miller says the people who convinced Senator Mike Lee to create his based Twitter account were the same people alleged to have unwittingly taken Russian disinformation money. So then when you're looking at actual senators who have started spouting proper pro-Russian propaganda, and you see they're being influenced by these people who started Tenet Media, who are receiving Russian money, you're starting to put 2 and 2 together, and it's looking like it's making 4. And then today, and this is the last thing I'll say, but this is absolutely brilliant. And my answer to this was, look in a mirror, mate. Something like that. Elon Musk, then one of his 82 tweets today, says... Actually, no, it's not. No. This is one from ages. This isn't one of his 82. This is from last September the 8th, 2023. I'd love to know what he thinks now to this. But this has come up again today, doing the rounds again today. Where is all the pro-Russian propaganda? We don't see it. Elon Musk asking Twitter about Twitter. Where is all the pro-Russian propaganda on Twitter? I don't see it. Dude, look in the mirror. You are it. You are part of that amplification. You are part of the process. You are a useful idiot. Or you're an agent of Russia because you know that it's the only route to continued profitability with SpaceX and Tesla with the raw materials you need from Russia and China. This is why you absolutely bang on about freedom of speech all the time, apart from in Russia and China. So you'll rant away about Brazil and freedom of speech, but you won't say a word about Chinese freedom of speech constraints and restrictions. You won't say a word about Russian freedom of speech constraints and restrictions. That tells you all you need to know. Where's all the pro-Russian propaganda, mate? You are it. Sorry, it's another long one. Goodness me, it's all happening. I hope that by watching my stuff, you're getting a sense of what's going on. I am biased. Of course, I'm biased. So I'm right the other end of the spectrum to these guys, but I just want what's best for Ukraine. And I can tell you straight up that these guys are not what's best for Ukraine. Tim Pool is not good for Ukraine. Elon Musk is not good for Ukraine. Yep, Starlink's out there, brilliant. But the US Department of Defense had to take that away from you, Musk, because you were trying to ruin it for Ukraine, and you created with them this separate military entity of Starlink, and they then took on the contracts of providing the monthly subscriptions and whatnot for Ukraine. So, you helped them at the beginning, but you are not a help to Ukraine in a larger scheme of things, certainly in the information space. David Sachs is not a help for Ukraine. Peter Thiel is not a help for Ukraine. Benny Johnson, Lauren Southern, these people, Dave Rubin, are not helps for Ukraine. And I'll take that one step further. Donald Trump Jr. And a further step further. Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. These people are not existing to promote international security and to promote, moral betterment of the world. They don't care for Ukraine. We care for Ukraine and for doing what is right. And so that's why I say what I say. And screw you guys. Not you guys. Love you guys. Screw you guys. I'm going home. I'm already home. I need a cup of tea. Ta-da.